Well, I have a good example of push and pull, and this story starts with you, the Research Library Partnership. From time to time, we'll poll partners to find out what topics are burning for them, what things they would like us to investigate, explore together with them. And when we asked the members of the Research Information Management Interest Group about what topics we should look at next, this was a while back, they said, well, do something about digital humanities. And when we asked what, they didn't exactly know. We should do something, though. So staff came back to a staff meeting and said, we should do something about digital humanities. And Jim said, but what? And we demurred. But then Jim went to a meeting where library directors asked him, what are you doing about digital humanities? And then he came to a staff meeting and said, perhaps we should do something about digital humanities. So our question, of course, was what do we have to contribute? What can we do that is not already being done that will make a valuable contribution? So we looked around and it became clear that librarians have talked a lot about DH in libraries. Librarians go to meetings to talk to other librarians about libraries and DH. And we thought, well, maybe the thing for us to do at least was to immerse ourselves in the researcher's point of view and to see what might come of it. So get smart and then figure out, do we have something to contribute? So we set out to familiarize ourselves with the scholar's point of view about their processes, their issues, and their needs. We followed online discussions, we attended a variety of conferences, we took advantage of opportunities to talk to scholars about what they do, how they do it, and where they'd like assistance. And in informal focus groups, we asked questions like, remembering a piece of work you did, what kinds of sources did you use? What made them easy or hard to find? How do you publish or share the outcomes of your research? But what will happen also to tools or new versions of your source material or other byproducts of your work? And what sorts of skills do you wish you had on your research team? So we synthesized all that we heard and shared it internally, and together we agreed that this might be useful to share with library directors who are not already in the thick of DH support. So accordingly, our essay addressed the subset of library directors who were deciding how to engage with digital humanities. In the essay, we discuss specific concerns of scholars engaged in DH and tie these to decisions that library directors might make about, and we were hoping to bridge this gap between what the DH scholars think and how library directors approach the topic. So hitting the title question head on, we said, well, it depends. Does every research library need a digital humanities center? Not always. DH Center doesn't always meet the needs of your researchers. When it is warranted, it's not necessarily best situated in the library. And there are lots of models that demonstrate successful collaborations with digital humanists. So in most settings, the best course is to observe what your local academics are already doing and then take appropriate action. In order to learn about DH, you might consider a survey of faculty members or a faculty advisory group. Often having library staff serve as liaisons to academic departments or centers on campus is a good way to get familiar with researchers' work. You want to learn what other local resources are available to DH researchers, such as university information technology support, project management, support they may have in their own departments. And look at external resources that might be available either for discovery, for provision of tools, for preservation services elsewhere. Find out what they cherish. So right near the top, we found digital sources and metadata were high on their list. So there's a connection. Find out what they lack. Often technical skills like statistics, programming, interface design. and find out what matters to them, and they'll often mention discoverability and preservation. Once you've opened up the lines of communication, you know a little bit better how to proceed. If you can identify a training need, that might be a good opportunity to train your library staff along with researchers to break the ice, exchange information, and create a little bit of lasting synergy. Ultimately, the boundings might blur to the point where you have library staff actually on DH teams and DH researchers on library staff. So lots of roles for libraries in DH, and we suggest a constellation of ways to engage. So in some cases, there might be a single service or entry point into DH. In other cases, a few services might meet the needs of your local scholars. In others, an array of services and points of engagement might be offered. And every so often, yes, a full-blown DH center is born. So one of the easiest ways to begin is to look at what the library already offers and make sure your digital humanities scholars know about it. So DH LibGuides and websites that are a way to package together your existing services and resources that may not already be reaching researchers, but then you label them as a virtual DH center and publicize them. It's a low overhead way to promote your tools, your training, the assistance you might have to offer with curating data or creating metadata, even as you explore other needs. Another successful example is offering space and equipment not otherwise available to them. Collaboration space is often hard to come by at a university. Specific software and hardware might exceed a particular project budget but be affordable as a centralized resource. And server space is another offer that might be very, very welcome. We were surprised how dominantly metadata figured in scholars' descriptions of their work. And as we were off learning about scholars' metadata desires, our colleagues back at OCLC were enriching VIAF, the Virtual International Authority File, with names from Perseus and the Syriac portal. The scholars behind the Perseus catalog aim to provide access to online editions of every major Greek and Latin and Greek author from antiquity to 600 CE. The other collaborative digital reference project researches texts in Syriac, which comprises the third largest surviving corpus of literature from the Roman Empire. So these scholarly contributions enrich VF by adding script forms of names that previously lacked them, and as well as adding new names. And that in turn, the scholars benefit from using VF persistent identifiers for the names in their own databases and linked data applications and scholarly discourse, and they appreciate VF as a means to disseminate their own research beyond their particular community. Prosopography accounts for a lot of the interest in VF and authority work in general. Researchers establish disambiguated names in a manner that lends itself to visualization in order to draw connections within groups of literary characters or within groups of historical figures. Sometimes the library is consulted a bit after the fact. In one case, a collection developed over a period of 14 years by faculty members and grad students became technologically out of date. A couple years after the project was finished, the library reformatted files and rebuilt the web presentation. That library now suggests that long-term archiving strategies be put in place early on, and the library, of course, is eager to help with those plans. They refer to it as the DH path to production, in which creativity flows into sustainability. A mutually beneficial relationship can be developed by lighting a path to special collections. The National Library of Wales has a digital humanities research program. They partnered with academics to integrate digital collections into research. The University of Wales funded an academic research chair to set up the initiative. The National Library's goal is to make the library's digital collections more sustainable by supporting their use for scholarship. So they're situating the digital collections as an essential part of the scholarly research infrastructure. And in a few moments, we'll hear from Adam about how the British Library is connecting collections and scholars. Whether or not a library has one staff member, several, or a center devoted to DH is largely a local issue. An example, at the University of St. Andrews, they're fortunate to have a DH-skilled librarian, and they gave her autonomy to launch DH projects based on the library's special collections, as well as providing support to research initiating their own projects. At the Maryland Institute of Technology in the Humanities, that center is jointly supported by the College of Arts and Humanities and by the university libraries. So they've got representation in the directorship from both the academic departments and the libraries to solidify that relationship. They've run a digital humanities incubator to introduce library staff to digital humanities through a series of workshops, tutorials, and project consultations. Stanford has been taking a loose collective approach to DH. Their program has no hierarchy, and it's distributed through the Spatial History Lab, the Literary Lab, the Center for Textual Analysis, the Music Department Center for Computer Research, all these other department groups, as well as the Stanford Humanities Center and various units of the library. And Columbia University's Digital Humanities Center is an example of a center developed by and in the library. They have a staff of two full-time professionals, 6 grad consultancies, and guidance of a steering committee of 4 to offer a wide range of resources and services. So, do you need to put a DH center on the map? Again, not necessarily. If a center is the right thing for your institution, should it be in the library? Not necessarily. In fact, it might not even be in your institution. Collaborations spawn some of the most successful centers. So here we have a number of examples. The University of Amsterdam has a collaborative initiative called the Center for Digital Humanities, and just on the plane on the way here, I was learning that they've entered into a new partnership with several other entities called the Center for Humanities and Technology. Göttingen Center for Digital Humanities is a co-laboratory cooperating with 5 other institutions. At a larger scale are the national and EU scale centers, the eHumanities group in the Netherlands, Australia's Humanities Networked Infrastructure, another virtual laboratory that aggregating data and tools. In Australia, Clarin, distributed research data infrastructure that provides access to language data collections and the tools to work with them. The digital research infrastructure for the arts and humanities, facilitating long-term access to European arts and humanities research data. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about the reception to the digital humanities essay that came out of our research. And Bethany Nowicki from the University of Virginia said, libraries have the right and responsibility to structure initiatives and shift resources not just in response to faculty requests, but in considered anticipation of them. This was the kickoff to a very lively, spirited discussion about the variety of ways libraries might engage with digital humanities, and I hope it will continue in our discussions here today. Here's a few other voices. Someone says, for years we've all been increasingly competing over the same barely growing pool of qualified candidates. The only way a new center can find plausible people is to hire them away from somewhere else. There simply aren't enough qualified people out there. Another voice, I would agree that a center is never the only or likely best response to perceived need for digital humanities support, as long as that's amended to add, unless they want to be relevant as a research library. Another voice, I forwarded the essay to my dean. We're looking at the virtual option to begin with, although most of the faculty members I've spoken with would like a physical place they can go. The chief value of the report is in its clear reinforcement of the notion that a one-size-fits-all approach to digital scholarship support never fits all. And I like this one. We don't all have to do the same thing. We simply have to find where we fit or make a place for us to fit. Think of stone soup, and you may simply be the one bringing the stone. So there was an animated back and forth on Twitter and blog posts, and the discussion of the essay just kind of gently blended into the ongoing DH discourse. One of the themes of the essay and the subsequent discussion was when to support, when to collaborate, and when to lead. The answer, again, often very local and related to shifts and changes in the research process. Changes in research aren't evenly distributed. Some universities will have a cadre of vanguard researchers, while another might have a single DH scholar. Libraries can also be vanguards or outliers in their engagement. When change is broad-based, it's clearer to see the appropriate response, and we need to be calibrating by what we learn and what happens as we try different things. Digital humanities right now is at a crossroads, challenged by traditional academic structures, values, and incentives. Boutique projects will eventually give way to disciplinary changes, which will in turn affect change in the academy. As changes are embraced by the academy, e-scholarship will be seen simply as scholarship. And we need to ensure that libraries are attuned in order to retain their position as the heart of the university.